Hey, y'all. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Unfeigned the Podcast. I'm Jay. I'll be your host. And today's episode may have a bit of a different feel. So we're going to pivot a little bit. And I want to talk about a few issues. I'm hoping to get them all on this episode. If not, I might have to just split up the episodes. But the first thing I would like to talk about is this idea of mental health. Now, it's definitely a buzzword, definitely much more so today than it ever was. And I'm not saying anything bad about that. I think, I love the fact that we now put more attention to it, that we're considering it more. You have famous people that are pushing this uh, mental health awareness agenda, and I love it. I think a lot of times, all too often, we think of the big mental disorders, though, when we talk about mental health. And I think it's just so much deeper than that. And so I want to talk a little bit about my perspective based on my story, some things that I've learned. So before we dive in, just want to say thank you for listening. Thank y'all so much. I appreciate y'all so much. I want to connect with you. So after this episode or regarding any of the episodes, reach out, email me at unfeignedpodcast@gmail.com. Again, unfeignedpodcast@gmail.com. Or you can send me a message on Instagram, Facebook, or LinkedIn. But I want to connect. I want to hear your story. I want to talk more in depth about these issues. So I would love to connect. All right, so let's dive in. I want to talk about um, an aspect of mental health that I think gets overlooked a lot. And that's sort of the functional mental health disorders, right? The functional mental health issue, right? We all probably could come up with a list of like the big ones, right? The quote unquote big ones that are um, that are more serious. Well, I shouldn't even say that, more evident maybe. Um, but there's this functional side of it where nobody knows, right? When I was homeless, I used to joke about being functional, a functional homeless person, excuse me, or functional homelessness. And it's got all the same aspects, but nobody knows because you still function, right? And so this idea of this functional side of mental health, um, I think back to when as a young adult, um, and then going into college, and then going into marriage, in these different stages of my young adult into adulthood life. And I would keep, I would keep people at a distance, right? I would keep them just enough in the dark. And I was afraid to look insecure. I was afraid that I messed up. I was afraid to admit that I messed up. I was afraid to admit that I didn't know how to do something. I was afraid to admit that I couldn't figure something out. I was afraid to admit that I might not be good enough to do whatever. And it was all this insecurity, and I was afraid to be insecure. I was afraid to look insecure because I didn't want to look like a loser. I didn't want to look weak. I didn't want to look afraid. I didn't want to look like there were cracks in my quote unquote armor. And it affected my life greatly. It affected my relationships greatly. And what I did was I put out this image, right? And I put out this image that I wanted people to see because I didn't want them to know what was really going on, right? I was trying to hold everything together, and I was doing a pretty good job at it. And we all do. We all do a really good job at it for a little while. And what we don't anticipate is it starts with a little crack here and there, right? So we're trying to hold all this stuff together. We're trying to hold it all up. And we do okay for a little while, but then eventually there's a little crack and then another little crack. And we try to cover it up. We try to hide it. And then there's another little crack and another one and another one. And eventually we can't hide all of them. We can't cover them all up in time before another one pops up. And then before we know it, everything has crumbled around us. It all comes crashing down, right? Everything falls apart. And we've done such well, I shouldn't even say we do a good job. We try so hard. We put so much effort into um, into portraying this image, into hiding what's really going on. We put so much effort into what we want people to see, trying to control their perception of us. And for all appearance sake, it looks like we have it together. Right? People wouldn't know otherwise. And so it looks like we're good. And we even say things like that. We say things like, "Oh, I'm good. I'm good." And we say these phrases like, "There's always a way. It's all good. It is what it is. I'm good. I'll take care of it. I'll figure it out." And we say these things, and all those phrases are good. They're good and they're true in the right context, in a healed context, in a safe environment. In the right environment, in the right context, those are good. But in a broken context, in brokenness, in an unhealed version of yourself, those are walls we put up because we don't want to look a certain way. We don't want to appear a certain way. We definitely don't want to admit that we've fallen short. And even more so as men, right? We're the ones that are supposed to have our stuff together, right? We're not supposed to look weak. We're not supposed to be weak. We're not supposed to be insecure. We're not supposed to mess up. We're not supposed to be emotional. And it's unfortunate because we're not, quote unquote, supposed to talk about these things either. But in general, and let me say this, uh, most things I talk about are in general because you cannot form an argument based on the outliers. Outliers are the exceptions. And you can't form your argument based on those. You can't base your argument in those because those are outliers, those are exceptions. So when dealing with the outliers or the exceptions, your method of dealing with that has to be in the exceptions, has to be an exception, has to be an outlier also, right? So that's why when you're forming an argument or you're basing your argument, it has to be on the general, what's generally true for the majority. And so a lot of things I talk about are, the general. And so I know I just had this little brief thing about men, but in general, people, men and women both do this. And so we keep people at a distance. We keep them just enough in the dark so that we can still control other people's perceptions of us. And so I did that for a long time. And it probably appeared that I was good, that I was fine. It probably appeared that I had my crap together. It probably appeared that I was doing well. And that's because that's the image I cast out there. Right? I projected that to people. But inside it was chaotic. I was falling apart. But I didn't want anybody to know because I didn't want to look a certain way. And I've never been one that actually cared about what people think, but I do care about what the right people think. And so I did that for a long time. I didn't want people to know what was really going on because I wanted to project this image. And then I get married. And I brought the same behavior into my marriage. Because here I am, I'm getting married. I'm going to be a husband, and I'm supposed to be certain ways. Like I'm supposed to be able to take care of my family. I'm supposed to be able to provide. I'm supposed to be able to protect. I'm supposed to be the one that takes care of stuff. I'm supposed to be the one that figures stuff out. I'm supposed to be the one that makes sure my wife doesn't have anything to worry about. I'm supposed to be the one that is strong for my family. I'm supposed to be the one that keeps it all together and make sure everything works out the way it's supposed to work out. And I keep saying supposed to because, unfortunately, whether you like it or not, whether you believe it or not, that has nothing to do with whether it's true or not. It's true because it's true. And again, in general, men have expectations put on them, right or wrong. Because you see all of this in the right context, in a healed version, in a healed context, they're all really good and they're right. And it should be that way. But in a broken environment, when you're acting out of a place of brokenness, all of this becomes perverted. And so I say supposed to because that's the expectation. However, because it's from a place of brokenness, more often than not, what happens is those expectations that are inherently good, that are placed on men, especially as husbands, what also is being projected is the opposite of that. So I'm expected to provide. Well, what happens if we're struggling? Expected to have it all figured out. Well, what happens if I don't know what to do? I'm expected to be strong for my family. What happens if I'm afraid? So all these expectations, which are naturally good, but coming from a place of brokenness, all these expectations also carry their nemesis with it. And so what we're being told is, well, you can't be weak. You can't be scared. You can't break down. You can't be depressed. You can't be anxious. You can't be insecure. You can't be confused. There's no way that you can admit you don't know what you're doing. You definitely can't admit that you're struggling. And so what I did was I stuffed that in, kept it locked in, deep down. And I tried to hold it all together, and I was trying to juggle all these things. I'm trying to hold all these things, all while keeping my wife just far enough away, just enough in the dark, because I didn't want her to look at me and see a loser. I didn't want her to look at me and see an insecure person. I didn't want her to look at me and say, he's not being the man he's supposed to be. And I didn't want to feel judged. I didn't want to feel stupid. And I'm not saying that automatically happens. I'm not saying that is the case. What I'm saying is coming from a place of brokenness and my unwillingness to be transparent and vulnerable. That is when I give power, remember, to that inner critic of ours that says, you're going to look stupid. She's going to think you're weak, man. God, you're supposed to be the one that's providing for this family and supporting this family. You can't even do that. Like, you're a loser, dude. And that's what she's going to think. That's your inner critic. And you give your attention to that. You become attracted to it. You start to pursue it. And before you know, it has this power over you. But I didn't want to look like that. I didn't want that. And so what I do, I thought, and this is funny. This is ironic. And we'll get to that in a second. But what you do is what I did was I kept her just enough at a distance, just enough in the dark, because I thought by doing that, I could control her perception, what she saw of me. And I wouldn't look like all these things that my inner critic was telling. And the ironic thing is that once we choose, remember, choose, commit, and confront. Once we choose to be vulnerable and transparent, Once we choose to allow people into that space with us, and don't get me wrong, people should have boundaries. I get that. And only you know who those people are in your life that you would allow to enter into that space, but you should let them. Though whoever those people are for you. Once we choose to be vulnerable and transparent, and once we choose to allow those people, whoever those are for you, once we choose to allow those certain people to enter into that space with us, we actually become the actual person, not just the projection of that person. Does that make sense? We become the person that we're trying to be, that we want everybody to see us as. We actually become that person rather than projecting that. But really, we're all broken and everything's falling apart. And we're all the things that we don't want to be. Once we step into this place of healing, which starts with vulnerability and transparency, and once we allow people to step into that space with us, again, the right people, and only you know who those people are for you. Once we allow them to step into this space with us, all of a sudden we begin this process of becoming the actual people that we're just trying to project, but we become the actual version of that, the healed version of it, not just a projection. And I didn't realize that for a long time. I kept people just far enough away because I thought I was protecting myself. And so I chose not to be vulnerable. I chose not to be transparent. And the whole thing fell apart. And it's inevitable. It will. None of us can hold all of that together all the time. So eventually it comes crumbling down. Everything falls apart. And now instead of getting ahead of it, instead of choosing to enter into this space, especially with your spouse or your significant other in a relationship setting, especially in that environment, instead of stepping into that place together, choosing together, both people being vulnerable and transparent. Well, I'm only talking about my side, the man side, but instead of both people choosing to be transparent and vulnerable, both people choosing to step into that place of depression, of anxiety, of fear, of insecurity, of confusion, of weakness. I mean, the list can go on and on, but instead of both people stepping into that place together, I chose to be unwilling to do that. And I chose to keep people just far enough away. But should you choose to step into that place, should you choose to be vulnerable and transparent, healing takes place. And it took me a while to learn that. And it's unfortunate because it probably could have saved my marriage. But I talked a lot about my side. And mainly it was when I got married. But I mentioned a bunch of my perspective. But it's not just the man. It's not just men. I'm going to share a bit of my experience. I cannot claim to be an expert of what happens to the women because I'm not a woman. I can claim to be an expert of what happens to the men because I'm a man. And expert probably isn't the right word, but I've been through it. And so I shared a little bit about how it used to be. I'm out on the other side. I've healed from this, and I'm healing, I should say, from this because I've chosen to be vulnerable and transparent now. Right. So I have been becoming the man that I'm supposed to be, the one that I was simply projecting back then, but what wasn't really. And so here's in my experience, I think here's what happens. So we're gonna play out a few different scenarios. So let's say me, and I'll use me and I'll just say who my significant other, like it's just in general, not specific to my marriage or not. But well, I'll just say man and woman. So there's a man, and let's say the man is keeping the woman at just far enough away, just enough in the dark, right? All the things that we just talked about. Let's say let's imagine for a second that the man is acting out of that broken place. And let's just imagine for a second that the woman is coming from a healed place. And she can sense something's off with or without that sense. She just wants to communicate and she wants her husband to open up. And so that she attempts to break through, or she attempts to communicate with her husband, and she attempts to go to a deeper emotional connection with her husband, and the man is keeping her just far enough away. Well, I think God communicates with women differently. Women's intuition, that's a real thing. I don't think it's some wacky science. I think it's a real thing that God has designed women with. And so more often than not, and it's different for all women, but more often than not, they sense something is off. And so as they sense something's off and they're trying to connect deeply, and the man is keeping them at a distance, well, there's a bit of a fight that is taking place because the man is trying to defend his territory, right? I need to put up these walls. I need to defend my position that this is what I want her to see me as, because I'm convinced she's going to see me as the opposite if I let her in. And she senses something is off, so she's trying to get to the bottom of it. She wants to figure out what it is so that she can communicate and they can work through it. And well, the more that this quote unquote battle takes place, where the man's keeping her just at a distance and she keeps trying to get in, well, eventually what happens is the man becomes so defensive and the woman goes on the attack. And women deal with their own mental health. I get it. It affects women also. But what happens then is, even if the woman was coming from a place of healing and of love, it shifts because the man has kept the woman so at a distance, just enough in the dark for so long. And now the woman becomes combative. Right now she's on the attack, regardless of how it started, because she needs to find out. She needs to know. She knows something's going on. She knows something's not right. She knows something's off. And she needs to know, and she doesn't know why the man's not telling her. And it can turn into judgment. It can turn into accusations. The man could get defensive. The man could shut down. And all of a sudden, you see this gradual split, this gradual gap start to form, and it just gets wider and wider and wider. And you hear this common phrase of, well, we just grew apart. I'm not going to get into it on this episode, but on the next episode, or on one of the next episodes, I am going to talk about my perspective on that. So you hear that phrase, we just grew apart. Well, I think it's impossible to grow apart if you do this one thing. It is 100% absolutely impossible for a couple to grow apart if you do this one thing. And we'll talk about that probably on the next episode. But as far as the woman's mindset and their mental health goes, is what happens then in that little quote unquote game or dance that's happening, where, you know, she's trying to figure it out and he's trying to keep her at a distance. She's trying to figure it out. He's keeping her at a distance. Then all of a sudden what happens is it shifts and it becomes a bit negative and aggressive, and it becomes, you know, there's attacking and there's getting defensive, and then there's accusing, and then there's shutting down and leaving and all this stuff. Well, then what happens is the woman no longer wants to try to enter into that space because she realizes it's not safe. The man doesn't want to let her into that space because he realizes she's not safe. And so now you have two people that are operating out of this brokenness who feel like they're not safe for each other. And it gets all messy. All of it gets broken. Instead of, oh, and it all came from just not wanting to be vulnerable and transparent. That's it. You literally made a choice that you were not going to be vulnerable and transparent for whatever your reasons were. Maybe it was too painful. Maybe you thought it was too painful. It's going to hurt too much. Maybe you thought, I don't want to look a certain way. Maybe you thought she's not going to look at me a certain way. She's not going to like me anymore. She's going to think I'm weak. She's going to hate me. She's going to judge me. She's going to be mean. Whatever you thought. Or from the woman's side, he's going to act this way. He's not going to care. He's going to shut down. He's just going to treat me like this anyway. So whatever your reasons were, that's not as important as the fact that you literally made a choice to say, I will not be transparent or vulnerable. Either one, man or woman. This is in general now. And if both of you are making those choices, it's really dangerous. Like, that's destructive. But you made a choice that you were not going to be vulnerable or transparent, and then that breaks everything and everything gets messy. When all that had to happen, and I know this is not oversimplifying. It is this simple. It's not easy. The road's not easy, but all that had to happen was a choice to be vulnerable and transparent, and to allow each other to enter into that space of transparency and vulnerability where it's painful and it's scary and it hurts and it's unknown and it's confusing and it's worrisome. And all that had to happen was that on the front end. And you avoid all the rest of the brokenness and messiness that leads to the phrase, well, we just grew apart. Or leads to the disconnect in so many relationships. And I want to say this. On one hand, I wish I would have realized what I know now back then. Because my family could have been spared a lot of destruction, a lot of devastation. My marriage would have been saved. My family would not have been torn apart. And on the other hand, I am extremely fulfilled that I am where I'm at now. Not necessarily the place I'm not talking about like what's going on in my life. I'm talking about this on the inside. I'm extremely fulfilled that I've been on this journey of healing and I've healed from a lot of these things. There are very few people now, very few, that know this version. Very few people that know me as my true authentic self, my healed self. And it's funny because sometimes I have conversations and it's not many because there's not many people. I could count on one hand, probably twice. And these conversations with these specific people. And it's funny, we laugh because the old version is unrecognizable to them because they only know the healed version. And so to try to imagine me any other way seems impossible. And so we laugh and joke about it, and vice versa too, right? So there's very, very few people, just a few, that have also been on this journey of healing. And I only know them this way. I only know them as their healed, true, authentic self, person that they were created to be. And so when we have these discussions about how we used to be, it's odd. It's very odd to see that person in like a different light, right? Or a different way, because we only know them this way. But I'll say this before we close here. I'll say this. Um, I believe this wholeheartedly. It does not matter what you've done. It doesn't matter what you've done. It doesn't matter how many times you've done it. It doesn't matter how bad you think it is or how bad it actually is. Anything can be healed. Anything. You might have convinced yourself that you need to keep whoever it is, you need to keep them at a distance and you need to keep them in the dark about whatever it is. And you may have convinced yourself that that will save you. Ultimately, it's going to destroy you and it's going to destroy the person that you're keeping at a distance. Unfortunately, a lot of times that's a marriage. That's your spouse. And the longer you keep this person in the dark, the longer that you keep this person at a distance, the further the gap becomes. The more severe the disconnect is. But it doesn't have to be that way. And yes, it's hard and it's painful. And it will not be easy. But it's very simple and starts with a choice. If both of you are willing to choose vulnerability and transparency, and both of you are willing to choose to let each other step into those places of your heart, of your soul, of your mind, if both of you are willing to let each other fully enter into those places, anything can be healed. And I know it might be hard to see, but better than it was before. Y'all, I'm going to record another episode because I wanted to talk about this a little bit more and specifically about why I believe it's 100% absolutely, without a doubt, impossible for couples to grow apart, quote unquote, grow apart, that cliche, if they just do this one simple thing. So I'm going to record that on another episode because I think it's important. And y'all, these are things that I wish I would have realized back then. I didn't realize these things. I just acted out of such a place of brokenness. And I wish I would have realized these things. And not just in my marriage, but even shortly after the divorce. And, when I was homeless, just that period of time from being kicked out of the house to now, all these things that have happened, I was just at such a dark place sometimes. And I didn't let anybody in. I didn't let anybody in. Most people wouldn't even know. I kept everybody at such a distance and I kept everybody just far enough away that they wouldn't realize, they wouldn't know. Because at the same time, I kept a smile on my face when I was around people. I functioned as normal as possible. So why would anybody have any reason to think something? I wasn't going to let them in. And I walked around with this phrase of, I'm good. I'm good. I'll figure it out. Is what it is. I'm good. And I just didn't let anybody in. And I need to say that there are people that you should not let in. Because those people, and only you know who those people are. But they will do more harm than good. But you know who the right people are. The people you should let in. And I didn't let those people in. because of my insecurities. And you see, it all ties together. All these episodes that I talk about, this inner critic, whatever you put your attention to, you'll become attracted to. Whatever you become attracted to, you'll pursue, choose, commit, confront, be curious, not judgmental. Like all these things all tie together. And when you're acting out of a place of brokenness, all of those things get broken. All of those things get twisted and perverted. All of those things, none of those things work correctly the way that they're supposed to work. But when you step into these places of healing, when you make the choice to be vulnerable and transparent, when you put your attention to the things that will help you become a better person, when you commit to your spouse to allow her to enter into those spaces with you, to be open, to be transparent, to be vulnerable, when you're putting your attention to the things that will help you break the addiction, this is all healing. It's all healing. I just didn't do that back then, and I wish I would have. But on the other hand, I know that God has used all of this. He has used my whole journey to make me into the person that I am today, and then the person that I'm still becoming. And that's the person He's designed me to be. The man I'm supposed to be, the father I'm supposed to be, the husband I'm supposed to be, hopefully one day. So y'all, thank you so much for listening. I do want to challenge all of us, especially those of you who are in a relationship. I want to challenge you that if there's anything, and I want to challenge you with anything. If there is anything at all, any big, small, devastating, exciting, whatever it is, no matter what, choose vulnerability and transparency with whoever you're in this relationship with. No matter what it is. It could be something that you are insecure about your hair. I mean, something that seems silly, but it's not silly to you. It could be something as devastating as there's another woman or there's another man. It could be an addiction. It could be a feeling of despair, or you get anxiety. It could be something maybe you just feel lost, like you don't know what to do. You don't know how to pull your family out of whatever it is. Whatever it is, small or big, light or heavy, regardless, in every situation, everything, choose vulnerability and transparency. Choose to let the person you're in the relationship, choose to let them into the space, into that space, those specific spaces where you're scared to let them in, let them in. And just see what happens. And I would love to talk to y'all about this more. I don't have it all figured out. I'm divorced. I obviously didn't figure it out back then. And I still don't have it all figured out. I don't have the magic formula. I don't have the answers. I mean, there are magic formulas, I guess, if you want to call it magic, but I don't have all the answers. I'm learning and growing and maturing and healing. I hope one day that God gives me another chance to become a husband. On a future episode that I'll record soon, I'm going to share about my the journey, I don't know what you want to call it, the journey, the mini journey of love. What I thought, what I perceived about it, what I thought about it, how I felt about it then versus now. And so I just want to, I would love to talk to you, reach out, because at the very least, I can share how I was and how I am now. and the difference and how it's impacted my life. I've chosen vulnerability and transparency. Vulnerability and transparency. I have no idea why I can't say those two. Um, I've chosen vulnerability and transparency, and I've chosen to be that with my relationships. So I'm more vulnerable and transparent with my kids than I ever was. And not just with like telling things. Like that's not only vulnerability and transparency. It's just like just telling things to people. It's deeper than that. But feeling things and understanding things, questioning things, being empathetic. And I'm more of a healed version with my kids than I ever have been. I've chosen vulnerability and transparency in any of my relationships that I have now. And that also means that, um, some relationships that I used to have, have either gone away or changed, because I'm just not that person anymore. And there's millions of reasons why relationships will have to end or have to change or whatever. Um, Sometimes those people become the ones that are not safe for you to let into those vulnerable and transparent spaces of your life because they will do more harm than good. Um, Sometimes it just happens that way. Sometimes it's just better for both parties for it to happen that way. But I have a very few people, very, very few, very, very few people that I have allowed to enter into these spaces of my life and that they've allowed me to enter into these kinds of spaces of their lives. And I've chosen vulnerability and transparency. And it's a daily choice because there's always going to be times where where the inner critic starts to get pretty loud and you have to make a choice and you have to commit to that choice. And so I've chosen that. And so I know what it used to be like. I know how I used to be. I know how it is now. And I know that how it's impacted my life. I know what I'm experiencing now. I know the kind of man I've turned into, the kind of relationships I can have now. And so at the very least, I can connect with you about that. And we can learn together and grow together and heal together. So I would love to hear your story. I mean, if you're experiencing this stuff, man, I love it. I would love to hear it. And I mean, especially if you're further along on your journey than I am, like we're all growing, we're all still healing, it's all still going to be a process, but I can learn so much still. I'm constantly about trying to become the best man I can be. And, if I ever decided I couldn't learn from anybody, that's when growth stops, right? That's when I die. So reach out, unfeignedpodcast@gmail.com. Hit me up on the social media platforms. Let's connect. Um, I'd love to even get you on here and we could talk about it openly if that's something you're willing to do. But y'all, thank you so much for listening. I appreciate you so much. I appreciate every one of y'all that listen. I hope that you continue with me on this journey. Um, Definitely reach out. I want to connect. Share this podcast with anybody that you want to, anybody that you think would benefit, anybody that you think, hey, this might help or might be a good listen. Um, just share it with them. And again, appreciate y'all. Thank you so much. And until next time, we'll see you then.